Hi, I'm Jamie with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm revisiting an old top 10 video that I made around 4 or 5 years ago about simultaneous action games. This is a genre of games or a mechanism in games that has really evolved over the last few years. There were games that had this before 4 years ago, but also just there's been an explosion, I would say, of fairly meaty, complex games that would normally, in a turn-by-turn format, would have taken 3 hours. But now they take around an hour, maybe an hour and a half at most, because of simultaneous play. And so I wanted to revisit this list and talk about this genre of games that I really, really love. Let's see. So some notes here before we jump in is that these are games in which your core decisions, costs, and benefits happen in real time along with all other players. Challenges and perks include making sure everyone is following the rules. That can be a challenge sometimes in these simultaneous games. There's potential for bluffing. That's a good thing. There's potential for bluffing in some of these games. There's collaborative cooperation in the cooperative versions of these games. This method can reduce playtime and downtime, but it can also lower interaction. So there's some give and take between this. And it also, especially for roll and write games, it can mean that you can scale them quite high to really high player counts, depending on the components that you provide in the game. I didn't focus too much on roll and write games. I do have a link in the video about roll and write games, but I didn't focus too much on them, largely because oftentimes in roll and write games, it's more like there's a shared benefit that all players are sharing rather than each player taking unique actions. There's a fine line there. I understand that a lot of roll and write games are simultaneous. I think that's an asset for simultaneous for roll and write games, but I think most of the games on my list, maybe even all of them, are not roll and write games. Some Stonemaier games that fall into this category are Rolling Realms. So this is a roll and write game that doesn't have separate actions, doesn't really have simultaneous actions, but it's very close to it. It's simultaneous benefits, and you're using resources to get other benefits. So it's very, very close to this category. Libertalia Winds of Galecrest. So here's Libertalia. This is a game where you are simultaneously choosing a character card to play with all other players, and then you reveal those character cards. There's bluffing. You're trying to figure out what other players are doing. There's interaction once those characters are activated in a different order. It's a game that I'm elated to be part of and to help bring back to life after the game originally came out around 12 years ago. There's also Pendulum. Pendulum is a simultaneous action game that uses timers and worker placement. The timers kind of pin those workers into different actions for different amounts of time. And when the timer expires, those workers are free to go to other actions. We have Between Two Castles and Between Two Cities, its predecessor, including a more recent version of it, Between Two Cities Essential Edition, which combines certain elements from the original expansion for Between Two Cities into this core game box, including the beautiful environments that kind of bring some color to the table. This is a game where it's a simultaneous tile drafting game. We're going to draft 2 tiles past the rest, and then simultaneously with your neighbors, you're going to place one of those tiles in the city on your right that you're sharing with the neighbor on your right, and then another tile sharing it with the neighbor on the left. So you have these real-time discussions happening around the table and also real-time drafting. A lot of simultaneous play in Between Two Cities and Between Two Castles, which is a similar game, a little bit less constrained and a little bit more complex. I asked Stonemaier ambassadors what their favorite simultaneous action games are right now, and they mentioned the following. Let's see, they mentioned so these are the picks that more than one ambassador mentioned: Seven Wonders, Earth, The Fox Experiment, Heat, Last Light, Libertalia, Winds of Galecrest, Magic Maze, My City, Planet Unknown, Project Elite, Quacks of Quedlinburg, Raising Robots, Septima, Spirit Island, and Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. I have not played Project Elite, so I'm going to put that here on my... A number of ambassadors mentioned this game, Project Elite. I haven't played it. Some other simultaneous action games that I want to play but haven't gotten to play yet are Imperial, Miners, and Flourish. So hopefully I'll get to play those maybe at Geekway to the West in a few months here. Also, I have 2 different categories of honorable mentions. One, general honorable mentions. These are games that I really, really enjoy. And I also have top honorable mentions. So these are games that almost made the top 10. So my honorable mentions are Trade on the Tigris, Resistance Avalon, Chocolate Factory, Spirit Island, Bunny Kingdom, Meeple Circus, Cartographers, Captain Sonar, The Reckoners, Atlantis Rising, Karuba, Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, Last Light, Furnace, and Roll for the Galaxy. And then my top honorable mentions are Mechs versus Minions, Savannah Park, Ink and Gold, Cartographers, Challengers, and My City. These are all games that I genuinely love. Just didn't quite, I mean, they didn't quite make the top 10, but I really, really liked all of those games that I mentioned on my top honorable mentions. So at number 10, let's start showing some images because we're on video here. Here is Orleans. So in Orleans, this is a game where it is a simultaneous bag building and worker placement game. Worker kind of private worker placement. You're only placing these workers, these little tokens here, on your own mat. And if you fill up a certain action with all the workers that it wants, like if I filled up the town hall here, I get a certain benefit. Same with these wagons. I get movement benefits. I get to place a little settlement here with the guild hall if I place both of these tokens here. So it combines the simultaneously drawing from the bag and simultaneously with other players. In a way, you're programming these actions. You're saying, I am going to gain the benefit of the town hall. But it was really eye-opening to me when I first played Orleans because it is a fairly heavy Euro game, medium to heavyweight Euro game. Euro games are games where you have a high level of player agency, a high level of control over the choices and those outcomes. And yet the game played in about 90 minutes, and it was awesome that this part of the game where it would not have been all that interesting to watch another player place workers on their turn, the game took that element out by making it completely simultaneous. There is a phase of the game that is not simultaneous, but that flows pretty quickly after you spent the time programming these workers onto your player mat. And it's really satisfying to solve that puzzle and to feel kind of the peer pressure of the table of not taking too long to do it, but not feeling the pressure, so much pressure in that moment of placing those workers that you need to make a decision that's too quick. You have time to position these workers in the way that's optimal for that current round. So Orleans, with its bag building worker placement element, private worker placement element, is my number 10 favorite game in this category. At number 9, we have a new addition to this list, and that is the Fox Experiment from Wingspan designer Elizabeth Hargrave. So in the Fox Experiment, there's much of the game is simultaneous, and that is so after you draft some foxes, you breed those foxes together, and in the breeding phase, which is kind of the meat of the game, you're rolling a bunch of dice. Let's see if I can find some dice here to show you. You're rolling a bunch of dice. No photos of dice here on Board Game Geek. I'm sure they're somewhere. But you're rolling a bunch of dice and then using the results of those dice to determine new foxes, to create new foxes. And so simultaneously, you're rolling these dice, you're manipulating them. Sometimes you're deciding how you want to pair different icons together, because many of the dice, I really should show you these dice, have only half icons on them. Here we go. So this icon has a whole circle, but also a half. And so if you have a wild half or another half circle somewhere else, you can pair it with that circle. And you end up using these dice to create new foxes that then enter the general supply. And so this is really satisfying in the Fox Experiment. And not only is there this simultaneous phase where you're doing something that would otherwise be a little arduous to watch each player do one at a time, you have plenty of time to do it, plenty of time to solve this dice puzzle of this fox creation. But then at the end of it, at the end of that phase, you get to show all players the foxes that you've created because they enter the general pool to be drafted in the following round. So I really like this combination of a simultaneous phase where no one is really paying attention to what anyone else is doing because it doesn't matter, combined with the next stage of the game, which is where you get to show off the fruits of that simultaneous creation phase. I think that's a really clever addition in the Fox Experiment at number 9 on my list. At number 8 is the game Bullet. This is such a weird and clever game. It's an abstract game where you have these you're pulling, again, it's like Orleans, you're pulling things out of a bag. You're pulling these tokens out of a bag, but you don't have control over where they go. When I pull a red 1 token out of the bag, I must put it in this red column, and I must put it 1 slot down because of the number 1. Must put it like the first available slot. So essentially, if this red token was already here and I pulled this red token, it would go to the first available slot here. And the thing in this game is, even though you have to empty your bag each round, you don't want these tokens on your board. Because if you ever draw a token, so if I drew like another 4 in this red column here, it would end up going down here, which would make me lose a life. So it's this puzzle of avoiding losing life by completing different patterns, and the patterns show you different tokens that you can remove from this mat. As I said, it's weird, but it's really satisfying to clear these tokens off your mat. It's a pattern creation game. You're creating these patterns, and you're doing this all at the same time as other players. But similar to the Fox experiment, where you're creating something, in this game, whenever you clear tokens off your mat, those tokens go to the player on your left. Not immediately, but they go into that player's bag at the beginning of the next round. And so not only in this competitive game are you clearing stuff off your mat, which helps you survive longer, but you're every token that you clear off, you're increasing the chances that your opponent will lose all of their health first. They're going back into that opponent's bag. It doesn't feel like you're directly hurting them because you have to do it to survive yourself, but you are clogging up their bag with all these different tokens, which is really satisfying. So I love this simultaneous phase combined with doing something that really does have a big impact on the player to your left. That is Bullet, and this is Bullet Heart, I believe, what you're looking at here. Here's the heart symbol. Bullet. There are different versions of this game that use the same rule sets, but with different asymmetric characters. Bullet Heart at number 8. And number 7 is the Guild of Merchant Explorers. This is a map building game, a map exploration game, where over the course of 4 rounds, or 3 rounds? I believe it's 4 rounds. You are placing tokens on a map, and at the end of each round, some of those tokens, the merchants, are cleared off the map, and it's only permanent settlements that you've established. I think outposts, there's a term for them. They remain on the board. So a lot of your work is removed from the board, but that gives you a little bit of creativity plus engine building over the course of the game based on what you've already placed on that map. But the simultaneous, this is such a clever mechanism in this game. So what happens simultaneously in this game is that a card is flipped at random from the deck. Here's the little deck here that you flip a card and it shows a terrain type or a combination of some terrain types. It'll show one of these icons usually. So for example, if this card is the next one flipped, you put the card up here, and it means that all players must place 2 tokens on this terrain type. The terrains don't have to be adjacent. You just put them on that terrain type. It has to be adjacent to other tokens that you have on the map. So all players do that simultaneously. You're flipping a card. All players are doing the same thing simultaneously, but probably different on different maps. Each player will put those tokens on a different place if they want to. And so that this is, I mean, you've probably seen this before in other games. You reveal a card, all players are using that card to do something. The really amazing twist in this game is that there are also cards that have Roman numerals. So in the first round, there's one of these cards in here that has Roman numeral 1. And when that card pops up, each player gains, I believe it's 2 special action cards. I think it's from this deck up here, special action cards. And they choose one of them to create a definition for what their Roman numeral 1 card is. So for example, this player here, they have this card in the number 1 slot. And so from starting on this turn and from then on each round, because these Roman numeral cards, each one gets added over the course of the round. So in round 2, you'll have Roman numeral card 1 and Roman numeral card 2. Whenever this number 1 card is drawn, this player has a unique benefit associated with that number that no other players have. So you're building this asymmetry over the course of the game simultaneously with other players as they're solving their own puzzle, their own map-making puzzle. This is so clever. It's a brilliant, I think, simultaneous mechanism in the Guild of Merchant Explorers. That's my number 6 pick. At number 5, we have 7 Wonders, the classic card drafting game where you get a hand of cards, all players get a hand of cards. You are selecting one of those cards, put it face down in front of you. You're either going to play it, you're discarding it for some coins, or you are you're using it to build your wonder. And then you're passing the rest of those hands to the player on the rest of those cards to the player on your left. You do this over 3 rounds or 4 if you're playing with the Leaders expansion. There are also many other expansions that do twists on that, but I usually play either with a core game or with Leaders. I really love 7 Wonders. It's a game that scratches a lot of itches. I love civilization building games. It has engine building. There's nice player interaction in the game because you can use resources from the player on your left and right, and you compare your military strength at the end of each round to the player on your left and right. So there is a strong reason, multiple reasons to pay attention to other players at the table, especially your neighbors, as the game continues. And it's just really nice to have this magical hand of cards show up, and you get to choose the one that fits you best at that moment. Yeah, 7 Wonders, classic game. Highly recommend that anyone play it if you haven't played it. And I love the simultaneous nature of the choices that you make in 7 Wonders. We're in the top 5 here. This is probably the heaviest game on the list. This is Raising Robots, also a new game. And I featured here the photo that I selected for it is the action selection system specifically. And I need to pair it with one other photo. Here we go. So every round or every turn of the game, and you can see we're playing this over 8 rounds. So 8 rounds of the game. Each player has their own little deck of cards that look like this and their own little deck of cards that look like this. This deck, each player shuffles it up and randomly reveals these two cards from that deck. So they're going to be different for each player. And what they indicate is the strength of the action that will be paired with that with this card, this energy card. It also shows, and this is something for all players to pay attention to, it also shows cubes that might go on this center action display. So that's random. Each player has a complete agency, though, over the actions they choose to pair with these energy cards. And they do this simultaneously and secretly. And then you reveal at the same time. So if I really need to upgrade this round, then I paired this upgrade card. I really need to fabricate too. So I paired fabricate with this card. And so that's how I select the actions that I will definitely take. However, we'll use this fabricate as an example. If I chose fabricate, not only does it say that I get 3 energy worth of strength for fabricate, but it also means that I put an energy cube on the fabricate action. You can see it right here. And what that means is that if there are action cubes on these actions, on this mat, then all players get to take these actions. So I definitely get to take fabricate, but in this case, because I added a cube here, I am enabling all players to take the fabricate action at the strength of 1 energy. So as you can see, I'm describing, a pretty important rule here in the game because it creates a huge decision point about what you need, what you think others might need, and what you think others might do, because there might be more than one action that you need to take as you're building your engine. And after this action phase, the game continues to be simultaneous because you simultaneously activate things on your mat by yourself. You do it completely by yourself. You start with this card, your asymmetric ability card, and then you go up to upgrade, assemble. You do these in a specific order, but you're doing it at the same time as all other players. In the first round, the first time you play, you might do it action by action with other players, but after that, you can just activate it completely simultaneously. As you can see, there's a lot of icons here, a lot of stuff going on. It is a complex game, but it flows so smoothly simultaneously. And I really love the level of interaction with that action selection choice paired with all the good things, all the amazing things that you get to create and do simultaneously with other players. That is Raising Robots at number 5. Somewhat similar, but definitely lighter, is Fantastic Factories. This is a game where you are building a factory of dice activation. There's a phase in this game where you're drafting cards, and not a full draft like Seven Wonders. There's a few cards in the display, kind of like the Fox experiment, and each player is going to draft one of 2 types of cards on the table. You'll select that'll join your hand. But then everything else is simultaneous. Every player will roll a bunch of dice, and they'll determine if those dice are going to be used for standard actions based on the numbers that you rolled, or to activate in any order of your choosing the cards that you have acquired, this tableau of cards that you're choosing. So you pair different numbers of dice to gain different resources that you're converting into other resources and converting them into cards and converting them eventually into points, which you can see up here. It is a really satisfying action puzzle of this order of operations. How do I use these dice? And really, there's no interaction in the game. So the game, one thing the game does to remove this level of interaction is they have you draw from the top of the deck. So you're not drawing face-up cards during the simultaneous phase. It's only during the non-simultaneous first phase of each round that players can see and use the face-up cards and can select from the face-up cards. But I'm okay with that. Sometimes I just want to run my own engine and not worry all that much about what other players are doing. I want to feel clever based on my own engine. And this game, one thing this game does do to add a little bit of hint of interaction or a reason to pay attention to other players is that it is a racing game and that you are racing to get a certain number of points or a certain number of cards on the table. So you can't just take forever to build your engine. You have to pay attention to what other players are doing and how fast they are racing up either the points or the cards played element. And so you're kind of keeping pace with other players and trying to race past them to trigger the end of the game before they do. I think that's a nice way to add in a reason to pay attention to other players in a game where everything's happening simultaneously. That is Fantastic Factories at number 4 on my list. And number 3 is Planet Unknown. This is a game that I really, really love. And honestly, like the top 5, the top 3 on this list, really hard for me to order them. On any given occasion, I could easily choose any of these games. This is a polyomino selection and placement engine building game with a ton of asymmetric planets. And I don't think I've ever played. I played on maybe 1 or 2 asymmetric planets. I think the game has tons of replayability, even with the core basic planet, as you can see here on this mat. It uses, I believe the term is a lazy Susan. I think I like the term industrial Susan a little bit more. But this comes with the game. This whole plastic contraption here. What this is saying is that the active player chooses to rotate this device to face them, so that a certain part of it faces them based on a tile that they want to select. And what that means for all other players is that each other player has a different element of this device that is also facing them. So let's say it was the player's turn on my right. They rotated this. I'm the teal player here. I get to select from either of these 2 tiles, the top 2 tiles in these stacks. So I have a choice there based on a decision you made. I have a choice between these 2 tiles. I have to choose one of them. I have to place it on my planet somewhere. And when I place it, I gain the benefits of both of the different elements on that tile. You can see every tile has 2 different types of terrain on them, and those help me move up these different tracks on my mat. So the meat of the game, again, I keep saying the meat of the game, but that is the case here, is which tile you're going to select and where you're going to place it and how you're going to move up these tracks, and different things that you'll gain will often combo off each other as you're doing that. That all happens simultaneously. There's no need for each player to wait for individual turns to do that. But there is a key choice in the game from the active player. This is so some of these games don't have an active player. It's just everyone taking turns. This one does have an active player, and that player is choosing the tile orientation that they specifically want the industrial Susan to be facing them, and that affects all other players. So I keep bringing up this type of thing where there is, even in these simultaneous games, you can have decisions that impact other players in different ways. They are not void of player interaction simply because they are simultaneous action games. That is Planet Unknown at my number 3 game on this list. And number 2, again, really tough pick to figure out exactly what to put this game that I love. This is Earth, a game where you are building a 4x4 tableau of cards that kind of create an island for you. And the action system in the game is brilliant. A really brilliant action selection system in the game where, again, similar to Planet Unknown, there is a current active player. And the active player chooses one of the 4 actions that you can somewhat see at the top of this mat. They're choosing one of these 4 actions, and they gain the strongest version of that action. And then all other players simultaneously gain a weaker version of that action. And all players get to activate all cards of the color of that action. So a couple different layers of this. It's a dual benefit game where oftentimes you can end up with 4, 5, 6 benefits based on what you choose. So when you're the active player, you are choosing primarily, I think, whenever I play, I'm choosing the thing that I need most at that moment, especially since I'm gaining the most powerful benefit. And I'm also choosing it a little bit based on the number of cards of that color that I have in my tableau. So if I have a lot of green cards in my tableau, like this is a green benefit right here, then I might choose the green action. If I've built my tableau, let's say this player right here has built their tableau largely around red. And so red is really strong for me to take. It also means when other players take red actions, it feels really good, or the red action, it feels really good. And it's also assigned to other players that maybe they might not want to take the red action because I have a huge benefit whenever the red action is selected. So there is a reason, again, to pay attention to other players in this selection of whenever it comes around to you, when it's your turn to choose the current action. There's also some racing elements in the game. There's both a race to finish your island first, finish this 4x4 grid, but also there's this shared goal mat over here where it's a race to complete a few different benefits. You can see there are 4 cards here that say, like, when you have a diagonal, 4 cards that go in a diagonal across your island, you've accomplished this goal. And you get to put your little token on the most valuable victory point space for that goal. So there is a racing element to complete goals in the game, even though everything else is simultaneous. This is another way, again, to add some player interaction to this game, a reason to pay attention to other players and the different goals they're trying to complete, and some pressure on you to complete those goals before they do. Yeah, really, really brilliant action selection system here, simultaneous action selection system. Oh, and one other thing about Earth, similar to Fantastic Factories, when you draw cards in Earth, you're drawing them blind. You're not drawing from a face-up display. Earth counters this by giving you, and similar to Fantastic Factories, it counters this by giving you lots of cards. You're getting lots and lots of cards. So it's not so much about which card you're drawing. It's about which cards do you use that actually end up in your hand because you have so many of them. And one of the core resources in the game is cards themselves. You can spend cards to gain benefits. So I think it works really well in that way to remove that level of interaction by just giving you an abundance of cards that you can use. Finally, number one, a game that you've probably seen if you watch my videos on many of these different lists. I love the Quacks of Quedlinburg. It's very rare that I would ever turn down a game of the Quacks of Quedlinburg. This is a bag building potion brewing game where with push your luck elements and also engine building because it's bag building, where you are putting tokens in your bag. You're buying these tokens to put into your bag, and then simultaneously with all other players, you are drawing them out of the bag and putting them in your pot here to brew a potion. And you are deciding when you want to stop drawing because there is a way that you can bust. And when you bust, instead of gaining points and resources to spend on more tokens, you have to choose between those two. You can either gain points or gain resources. The simultaneous part of this game is this token drawing element where you're drawing them all at the same time as all other players. You're doing it freely whenever whenever you're ready to do it. So you can kind of think through it, the odds of drawing the next token. Is it time for me to draw the next token, or should I just stop here for this round and get both benefits? That's entirely up to you during the simultaneous phase. This is paired with a phase of the game, and this counters the idea in these simultaneous games that someone might miss a rule, and you can mess up. You could cheat intentionally or unintentionally while you're drawing tokens out of the bag. But there's also a pretty big part of the game that is not simultaneous, and that's on this mat over here. At the end of every round, it takes you through a few different steps to remind you that this is when you gain benefits if you went the furthest up your potion track. So you are comparing your potion each round to other players. Again, some player interaction there. There's a catch-up mechanism where, again, you're comparing yourself to other players and gaining a little benefit if you have fallen behind. And then there's a phase for buying tokens. There's a phase for gaining points. And a phase for spending rubies and something else. So there is some structure to the game that is not simultaneous, but most of the game, including some of these phases I just described, like buying new tokens, that when you get to that phase, it is a simultaneous phase with all other players. So again, it's a huge benefit in this game that you are not waiting for other players to take their turns, but there's still a big number of reasons to pay attention to other players, and also just in terms of the social element of it. Because it's a push your luck game, players are moaning, they're groaning, they're agonizing over their decisions. They're exclaiming when they bust. And so you are socially interacting with other players as they are doing something that does not affect you directly. There's also even a certain token type in the game that is designed a little bit around player interaction, where when you gain, I believe it's the black token. When you buy a black token, it doesn't typically go in your bag. It goes, I think, in the player to your left. I think it goes in their bag. And every round, you get to look at how many black tokens the player to your left has drawn out of their bag. And so you are making someone else's bag a little bit better, positive player interaction. That's awesome. And you're also gaining a benefit yourself when they end up drawing that token, which I think is another clever way to add some interaction to simultaneous selection games. That is the Quacks of Quedlinburg at number 1 on my list. As you can tell, I love these games. I love this idea in games where you can have a medium weight game, even a heavy game, and you can get through it in around an hour to 90 minutes using simultaneous actions. It's okay to let players just get wrapped up in their tableau and their engine, the thing that they're building, that they're obsessing over. I think that's okay to do in some games. And some of the examples I've given today can hopefully give you and are giving me some ideas of how you can add player interaction to this style of game. Reasons to pay attention to other players and interact with other players, even though a large part of the game is done completely simultaneously. So yeah, those are my top 10. I'd love to hear your favorites in the comments below. Any that I haven't played or haven't mentioned that you'd recommend that I try, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that below. Thanks.